All right, everybody, and we are live. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem. It is my distinct honor and privilege, like you could tell how excited I am right now, to have the wonderful author Janny Wurts here on the channel. So thank you so much, Janny, for being here. For all of you who don't know, she's the author of the Empire trilogy with Raymond E. Feist, the Cycle of Fire series, standalones like To Ride Hell's Chasm, and then, of course, her magnum opus, the 11-book recently completed series, The Wars of Light and Shadow. And we are going to be discussing a little bit of book one, Curse of the Mistwraith, and also talking a little bit about her creative process as well. So, Janny, thank you so much for being here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and it's completely my privilege to be at your disposal for however long you want to run.
Oh, thank you so much. It's always like, it's always, I feel very lucky that we live in a time where we can all interact with each other this way. 20, 30 years ago, it wasn't the case that authors could probably have such direct relationships with their fans, fans of the novels. And I think it's a great way to get get more word out about books. So I think that's just wonderful.
That's definitely the good side of it. Yep, it moves a little faster than little hand-scrawled notes that come through the mail and get filtered by your publisher.
Was that how it was back in the day, in terms of like when there was more of a traditional publishing presence, and was it more of like that's kind of how you interacted with fans, or at conventions?
It's exactly how it happened. Conventions, or the publisher, that people would write and the publisher would collect the letters. They would write to the publisher because they didn't have your address, and the publisher would send them on to you because they would vet them for hate mail.
Right, sure.
But yeah, that's the way it worked up until the internet came along and Genie really started cracking the door. The old forum on Genie, if anybody remembers, it could have been before some of you guys were born.
Yeah, I actually don't remember. Would that have been like what, early 2000s or late
90s? In the 90s.
I remember first logging on the internet probably mid 90s myself. So it was in there in the periphery.
It was in there, and it was a lot more civil than it is now.
Yeah, definitely.
Different world.
Very, yeah, and it keeps changing really fast, it seems, in terms of kind of how people write books, how people expect to read them, and things like that. Do you feel like over the last few years, especially, things have changed in the way people kind of, I guess, like read books or ingest content or whatever?
Oh, completely different. Yeah, because originally you went to the bookshop or the library and you browsed the book.
Yeah.
There was no read inside this book function. There was no star ratings. There were no mass reviews by readers. There was no public opinion. There was no algorithm shoving titles down, except the one that put the books on the bookshelf to start with. And even that was different. It was much more regionally controlled.
Right.
And now it's consolidated, first nationally, then globally.
Yeah.
So you really sat down with a book, and it was you in the book forming your own opinion. There was no person and no opinion and no star rating, no nothing in between.
Right.
And you didn't judge a book by what other people said about it. You cracked the book open and you actually read the prose. And that's what decided you, was the cover of that book, what was said on the cover of that book, and then you opened it up and you read a few paragraphs and you said, is this for me or not?
Yeah. That makes
totally different.
That makes sense.
Very different world. So now, instead of what should I read next, and people pop it out on social media and expect all their friends to tell them, you were steered by your own preferences completely.
I think it's a lost art of spontaneity in that respect. So I completely agree. I think, discovery of something on your own, there's something to be said about that. And some of the best things I've ever read or music I've listened to have happened that way.
That book you shoved in your suitcase to go on a trip, and it was the only thing you had to read, and you hated the damn book.
Yeah.
Until you finished it and you went, oh my God, what did I just read? And it became one of your favorites. Today it would be DNF.
Right.
It'd be gone.
Yeah.
Or people would read reviews and go, this is too polarizing. It's got too low a star rating, even though it's 5s and 1s that's pulling it to the middle. So it was a very different world. And a lot of the books I started out disliking, or even albums of music, you'd buy the whole album, and the song that you disliked on the first, you buy it for this piece of music, but this cut that you didn't like ended up growing on you. And within a week, it was like, boy, my first impression of this was wrong.
Yeah.
That world is kind of gone.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's really interesting. I would say also, on the other side, kind of the other side of that idea is for longer running series that are sometimes intimidating for readers to get started in, finding an online community that's like, oh man, that was going to be, I really wanted to check that out, but I was feeling too intimidated to start. Now I have a whole bunch of people to read it with. That's like the other, it's that
That's the
double-edged
plus
sword
side
thing.
of it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely the plus side of it.
And 100% like watching Philip Chase's videos, Joanna from Joanna Reads, and like, AP Canavan, like talking about your wonderful books is kind of what turned me onto it. And then it was like there was no holding back after reading To Ride Hell's Chasm. I was like, okay, I'm ready for this 11-book series right away. So sometimes you just sometimes things get put on your radar that might have not necessarily.
That's the plus side.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would
So
love to.
there's nothing good or bad of any one method of thinking. I'd like to see a blend of all of it, frankly.
100%. Yeah. Yeah.
But you gain some, you lose some. It's a juggling match.
Definitely. Yeah. I would love to kind of know, because, I would love to kind of start off on a more general topic also of, was there anything that, for you made you decide, okay, I want to write The Wars of Light and Shadow? I know you were working on some other books and series before that. Was there some kind of impetus for you that made you say, this is the kind of thing I want to explore in fantasy, that I haven't seen explored, or this is the kind of story I want to tell?
Oh yeah. I had a list of things that pissed me off. Pissed me off in the real world. And I said, what would it take to have put this world on a different track? What would it have taken
Wow.
to push evolution in another direction? What would it have taken to solve this problem? What would it have taken to make people look at what's really going on? And so I just took a list of things that pissed me off. And I said, fantasy is perfect for this because you can hit these subjects one by one by one with the gloves off. And you're not going to get hate mail because you dissed somebody's religion or you dissed somebody's country or you dissed somebody's cherished belief. So you can put it somewhat at a remove until the person's in over their head and you really do make them think. So I've always loved fantasy, but also I didn't really start reading fantasy and SF till about 17 or 18.
Oh, wow.
I read everything else because our library did not have that stuff.
Interesting.
I discovered it later. So Tolkien flew open the door when I was 14, actually. I encountered that one. The library did have that one. And what Tolkien taught me was you don't have to be stuck in myths or fairy tales that we already have. Because up until then, most fantasy followed myths and fairy tales we already had. Tolkien blew the doors off by saying you can make your whole entire world up any way you want. So that was the lesson I took from Tolkien. Wow. What I objected to was the strict black and white, good and evil, war fixes all. Again, that list of things that ticked me off. And there's a big list. And so at the outset, with that list, I said, I'm writing a bunch of things that I don't have the knowledge to complete. I don't have the life's experience to complete this. I don't have the knowledge to even dip my toe into looking at the breadth and depth of this. So I set myself on a trajectory to accomplish that over the course of the series. So by the time I got to the point in the series where those things were going to be addressed, I would have had the experience, or I would have delved into those areas and lived it.
Oh, wow. That's
so
cool.
Yeah, you have no idea what's coming.
Yeah, I was going to say, I already feel like even within the confines of Curse of the Mistwraith, I had no idea what was going to come. It's like, and this is something I know we'll probably jump into in this kind of non-spoiler and spoilery category. So for those of you who are just tuning in, we're
not going to spoil yet.
Yeah,
we're not going to spoil yet.
Exactly. Yeah. So we'll delineate like very, properly when spoilers come and everything like that. But before we jump into Mistwraith, I kind of wanted to also speak on a little bit about your wonderful artwork, because I just am like captivated by these covers that you've illustrated. And I just saw some comments come in basically talking about that. So beautiful painting.
Oh, thank you.
Janny's art is simply breathtaking. I agree. Hard agree with all of these. covers had a lot more to do with the draw in the bookstore. Yeah, as a guitar player. Oh, cool. The cover of Curse of the Mistwraith definitely drew me in, and having read Empire, I snatched it up and was hooked. Yeah. No, I felt the same way. I mean, when you kindly sent me these books, and I'd seen the covers on other people's channels and stuff as well, but just seeing them up close, it's like the amount of attention and detail you put into your illustrations shows in parallel with how you approach your writing, you know, with the kind of care and love and detail. I would love to know a little bit about, you know, kind of your illustrations and what you try to look at when you're illustrating your book covers. Like, do you try to capture something that is a representative of where the characters are at that moment? Are you trying to capture, you know, because the different covers have different shades and colors as well. Do you kind of take that into account when you're...
There is so much symbolism buried in those covers. You have no idea.
Oh, man.
And how did this come about? I was always a doodler. And I've
Yeah.
always been the kind of person that said, if you want to do something, you throw your heart over the fence and then you follow it. You commit to it and then you chase it. So at the time that I conceived this idea, Frank Frazetta's a freaking genius, okay? There are very, very few painters globally ever in history that could paint like that man could paint. But my idea did not suit the misogynistic or the primal force that he put into his paintings. You know, the hero wearing the fur or the big sword and all the blood dripping, and the women that are half unclothed, you know. So I admire his work. I think it's beautiful. I've seen the originals. They are breathtaking. If you ever get the chance to see them, do it. Travel to see a Frank Frazetta original. It's worth it. But in order not to be stuck with that style of cover, I had to take my ability to doodle and draw and push it to the max. So I set out to write and paint. And like, do I put things into the covers? Yes. Curse of the Mistwraith, it's a secondary color scheme. There's a big X between what the characters are holding, between the sword and the music. You can see, yeah, the briars, the fist, the way the posture is, the guy who's looking away from you, the guy who's looking you in the eye. There are all kinds of buried clues here as to who's going to behave how. So I won't go into every single piece. You know, the clothing, the way this guy's coming a little bit unstrung. There's so many clues buried in the color scheme. In every painting, there's depth and depth and depth.
It's definitely a question of read and find out, right?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to spoil anything, but, you know, what are the characters protecting? What is their body language saying? What is important to them?
Yeah.
You can see a lot of clues. So, yeah, it's a mood piece. And in fact, I battled with the publisher not to have words and blurbs and garbage on the back. I said, let the artwork speak for itself. Leave what's inside the book a mystery. So you have to open the cover to see any more. So I did not want that advertising. I lost the war on the rest of the books.
Yeah.
But not on this one. I hammered them and said, please, please, please don't clog this up with words. People have enough expectations of what a fantasy book is going to hold. Don't give them more junk in front of the words.
Fair, yeah.
I wish publishers were braver that way, because, you know, let the people sink into the mystery a little bit, because curiosity is what leads you forward.
I completely agree. You know, I think it kind of what we were talking about just before we started the stream as well is the idea of ending chapters on a cliffhanger versus letting it be a kind of slow burn unfolding of story and characters. That's one thing I really love about Wars of Light and Shadow so far, and the Curse of the Mistwraith and everything. And I feel like there's an audience for each of them. You know, there's a vast audience, as evidenced by, you know, how much people are enjoying this on BookTube. There's a vast audience for people who want that slower, steady pace in the way they ingest their stories and things like that. So
the field has matured in many ways, but also I'm not writing for teens.
Right.
I'm not even possibly writing for very, very impetuous early 20s. And that's a mistaken impression, because Empire series fits. You can read the Empire at 13 years old. This book is not for 13-year-olds. No, I'm not saying there aren't 13-year-olds who haven't read it and got stuff out of it, because there are, but they are the exception rather than the rule.
Right.
So trying to tailor it to, this is really an adult read, and not because it's X-rated. It has nothing to do with that. It's the concepts, it is the angle of view, it's the perspective, it's the life perspective that you need, because it isn't about what happens, it's how it happens, and it's the internal battle of why it happens.
Yeah.
And it's also the battle of making the decision from a decision point where you don't have all the answers. The characters don't have all the answers. You don't have all the answers to the world in this first book. You're going to make assumption based on other, quote, classic fantasies to what you think you are seeing. And you're going to gradually realize you know nothing, Jon Snow. And that's part of it, because we're born in this world and we don't have the answers, and we have to figure it out as we go. And we have to break apart all the stupid things we're told. And we have to prove out the things that we were taught that were maybe right by breaking them and figuring it out the hard way. So you can't live your life without making a decision. You have to make the decision where you're at. And that means making mistakes, and that means carrying regrets. And what do you do with those regrets? How do you live with those regrets? How do you take something that was a big mistake and not have it follow you forever? Because you can never make it up. You can never fix it. You can never go back in time and repair inadvertent damage because you didn't have all the information. You can never take back what you just said. But you have to be able to get the ability to find a balance in how do you reconcile what's been when you had to make a choice and you had to make a difference based on not enough information. So this series is going to rip apart the not enough information. And as you gain perspective and you get more information, you go, what I thought there was wrong, what I assumed there was wrong. So that's why the DNF people who review these books and don't keep going, don't bother me. Because I said, you flew off the handle, you made a choice here, and you chose to do it without having all the information. Fine, you're forgiven. Go on, read something else. Because that's not what this book about. It's about developing that elasticity of thought to grow and carry forward. And you're going to do it as the characters do it. And you're going to make choices, and you're going to make opinions about what you thought you saw on the page based on not enough information. And that's going to surface as it goes along.
See, that's fascinating, because I know you're mentioning, when you were first starting the series, you didn't you felt that you didn't have as much of the life experience yet, and as you progress through the books, you gained life experience, and it shows through in the way the characters probably evolve, or the way the story evolves. And
I spent 20 years gaining the life experience before I published book 1.
Wow.
Because I knew that it was a bigger thing than I could bite off. It was a bigger thing that I could handle writing-wise, craft-wise. That's why I published, 7 or 8 novels before this ever came out, or more? I'd have to count. But I had a long career before the Empire series too.
Sure.
People don't realize that I was 4 novels down when the Empire series came along. So I had to work up to it, because otherwise I was going to not be capable of carrying the breadth and the depth of what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I get that. To that point, actually, I was curious, were a lot of these plot points, or where you wanted the characters to end up in, say, book 11, were they planned at the outset? Were were some of the broad themes planned at the outset, and then some of the other stuff was fleshed out later on? Or did you kind of know where you wanted the story to go?
This first spark of the idea was have light versus dark and flip it.
Yeah.
And of course, the original framing was, this will just be a big epic fantasy and war will solve it, until I'd say within 2 years. Within 2 years, all of the major things that I decided to put into this had developed.
Wow.
And it began with flipping upside down that war solved a damn thing. And that's been repeated. That story as to how I arrived there. I can repeat it if you wish. But so I said, fantasy, our history, our social structure, our books, our literature, our poetry, everything glorifies war. Our news glorifies war. There's got to be a right side and a wrong side. And it's so much more complex than that, and so much uglier than that, the way information gets twisted. So I got angry because I felt like I had been lied to by everything. All of my upbringing glorified war. All of my upbringing glorified the victim. All of my upbringing glorified strength in a way that wasn't healthy. So I said, this fantasy is going to break the mold right from the outset. And that led to a whole pile of other things that I encountered within that 2-year stretch. And I don't want to go into all of them because some are pretty personal. People
Sure.
will go into this series and they'll read it and they will pull out of it what they need to see at the time they need to see it. But I knew there was going to be a massive amount of depth and a massive amount of height. And I said, I don't have this perspective. I don't have the experience. And it caused me to go into all kinds of other things to develop that. So when I arrived at the books in Arc 4, Peril's Gate, Arc 4, Arc 5, I had that grounding and that non-grounding, that ability to think high enough, to reach high enough to pull this all together. And not every reader is going to see all the layers and levels that are in the series, and that's okay.
Yeah. That's really fast. I'm always, I'm always very fascinated by the creative process and how much it parallels different creative art forms, whether it be writing, whether it be music. And I always think about the idea of like, we have an idea of something we want to strive for artistically. And then it's like, we almost rise to the level of what we want to achieve as a person in the process of actually writing that thing or making that piece of music or whatever it is. And it's like we're kind of forever changed by how we interact with the creative process, I guess.
It is not logical. Intuition is not logical. You throw your heart over the fence, you throw the dart at that target, and you have no idea how you're going to get there.
Absolutely.
And intuition, the universe, moves to give you the answers that you require to cross the abyss. Yeah. And when you look backwards, the logic makes sense. You use the logic to edit it, to shape it. You use the logic to perfect that musical idea. But the pure intuition happens by magic. Honestly, you frame where you want to be, and then you sit on it until it comes to you. And the mistake people make is trying to do both at the same time. You cannot create and destroy at the same time. And logic is destructive. It locks things down. It chisels away. It removes or perfects. Intuition is not logic. The whole universe is at your beck and call, and you pull out the one piece that you need. That's not logical. It just happens. But it happens because you set the goal first. You set where you want to be. You decide where you want something to finish. You aim for what you want to hit, whether it's the emotion, the mood, the finish of the scene, the finish of the book, the finale volume. I don't care what it is. You set that goal, and then you find the way to meet it. And that is not given to you by logic. The person you meet that helps you complete a project that you want to complete, or the person that you meet that exactly meshes with what you want to do, you have set that goal, and now you're looking for it, and that's why you see it.
That makes sense. Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, definitely preaching to the choir on that one.
And there's always that point of resistance. Surely you understand this. You've gone through it yourself, Nikhil, where you start a project and it just, maybe it goes like gangbusters, but there's always that point a third of the way through where this is absolute trash. There's always that point of resistance where nothing is working. Nothing is meeting what you set out to do. There's always that moment which you have to push past that resistance. And I don't know why that happens, but it seems to be about a third of the way into everything you ever try. You hit that moment where it ain't working. And you have to put past that. You have to just push through it.
Yeah.
You have to decide it's worth it.
Totally. I completely agree. I think it's like, there's always a point in the process where you're left in doubt or you're questioned. And I think it's almost I remember I used to struggle against that a lot more when I was younger. And now I've kind of come to understand that it's something.
No big deal.
Yeah. It's going to happen. So,
you realize that maybe it'll twist a little bit. Maybe it'll end up a little bit different than you set out to do, but that doesn't matter. The point is that that point of resistance, it's almost like you got to reconfirm that
Yeah.
you're committed to this, and then it
Yeah.
starts to work.
Yeah. I completely agree with that. Gage says the dedication Janny has to getting life experience before publishing is admirable and impressive. I'd want people to read my work immediately. Yeah. Yeah, I think, living it is a huge part of that.
This idea was too special to just burn it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to reach up to make it happen.
Oh, thanks so much, Slay. I love your message, Janny. Although I was born a decade later, Iraq's invasion of my country, Kuwait, still heavily impacts me and my family to this day. War is brutal and ugly always. Yeah. And it's
There's so many other ways these problems could be solved if we just used our imagination or just listened to the whispers that became the rumble, that became the shout. There were many moments when an intervention could have been done before it comes to the desperate point where people think they got to kill somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the never-ending cycle,
I think it stems from the act of aggression is not understood by society. You aren't allowed to be angry. You aren't allowed to tell somebody bugger off. If you told them bugger off the first time they pissed you off, that is setting a boundary. That's telling them. If you watch animals interact, they tell each other quite regularly, bugger off. You're in my space, go away. But we've made it socially unacceptable, societally unacceptable, culturally unacceptable. And that's dangerous because then it gets bottled and then it becomes something worse.
Yeah.
It becomes the first time somebody swipes your stapler off your desk, if you told them bugger off, don't do that, and you really yelled at them, barked, they wouldn't do it again. That's a signal. You just invaded my boundaries. So the setting of boundaries is so misunderstood and misused. And I think it leads to a misuse of aggression. It leads to moments in history that things just break because repressed feelings, repressed people are not heard, and then it's got to come out somewhere. It's like the storm building. And if we understood that aggression appropriately used is okay, it is simply telling the person, you stepped on my foot, don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when people won't hear no, or then they're afraid to say no for whatever cultural repressive reason, that's where we run into trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, completely agree. Janny Wurts is so brilliant. Her prose and writing style captivate me and blow my mind at the same time. Yeah, no, I felt the same way from reading. Even To Ride Hell's Chasm first is what I read, and then The Gallant. And I felt it even more in The Wars of Light and Shadow. And it was interesting because, I feel like the way The Wars of Light and Shadow is written, at least in this first book, and I'm sure is probably representative of the series as a whole, is that there's a writing style that is beautiful and also forces the reader to slow down and really take in what they're reading and not just kind of blazing through the pages. And I would love to know, kind of writing process wise, is that something you kind of write in draft one, or do you embellish as you go in future drafts? You know what I mean? Like, is the writing style that you've developed for Wars of Light and Shadow, because it is a very unique and distinct style, is it something that you really try to incorporate from the very beginning? Is it something you kind of focus on getting the story beats down and then you flesh it out with the writing, or how does that work for you?
It's deliberate, but also the darn thing wouldn't write any other way.
Yeah.
When I tried, it just wouldn't come out. So I think the story dictated what had to be done. It's deliberate in that if you read House Chasm, the prose is a little thicker there.
Yeah.
Curse of the Mistwraith eases you into it slowly. As you go on, you're going to find the prose style is going to shift ever so slightly into a slightly different territory, so it doesn't throw you in all at once.
Yeah.
The problem that I had starting is I knew that I had to cover maybe 12 layers at once. I have a lot of balls in the air, and after Peril's Gate, I'm able to cut back because the reader has experienced enough at that point.
Yeah.
I can tweak things a little bit so that events happen a little faster. So I had to gear the writing to slow the reader down so that when you hit certain scenes in Peril's Gate, which is the tipping point of the series, you can handle what's being put at you in such a way that you can absorb it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it's both extroverted action and introverted action, and action that's going outside the envelope of what language can even describe, all at the same time. So the style had to be geared to do that. The second thing I did very deliberately as the series moved forward was I eliminated passive verbs. You aren't going to be told this site is like this or these people were like that. Not going to have those passive constructions. I pitched that because I wanted to create an experiential read. So you can't read these books and skate by. You're not going to be told. You're going to have to engage with what the character is experiencing in an active way, and it's going to force you to immerse. And not everyone's prepared for that, and that's okay. I like my beach reads too.
Sure.
So, you know, you pick the read that you're ready for at the time you want to read it. That's fine. So I'm not going to be upset with anyone that doesn't like how the style works, but it was deliberately set up because what's going to happen, you're going to end up in an experiential reality in these books. It's going to be a story that's going to impact you as if you lived it.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't sit here and say, I can overwrite what I want this character to feel on top of this prose. No, right. You're going to feel what that character felt. And that's going to throw you out of yourself. It's going to throw you off the track of what you want to think and force you to live in that character's shoes. And not everybody wants to immerse that deeply in somebody else's experience. They're scared of it. It's scary. You're not in control anymore. The character is. So the style in these books was geared to create that level of engagement, and it may not work for everyone, especially for the person that's scared of emotions.
Sure. I'm sure we're in for a lot more of that in the future entries as well. I had a question actually about a particular theme that really resonated with me personally. And I think, you know, this is something I've seen in To Ride Hell's Chasm. I saw this in the Gallant, and now even more so in the Wars of Light and Shadow, is the theme of, I guess you could call it prejudice or preconceived notions, maybe. And whether it be preconceived notions between the characters or preconceived notions the readers have about the characters. And I love how it's kind of multidimensional in that way. Is that something you kind of wanted to really explore consciously in the series, and maybe more specifically in Curse of the Mistwraith?
Totally. Yeah. History is written by the victor.
Right.
Running into a situation and having an opinion before you've taken the time to know that there's so many angles of view and so many, and you know, it isn't always you don't always want to listen to the person who's pissed off about an injury.
Yeah.
You want to see, you got to back off from a situation and then get down to the personal. And too often we go from the personal and flip off and have an opinion right away.
Totally. Yeah.
So how many different news sources do you read before you think you even begin to have a grasp? And there's some complicated things going on in the world today. It's so deep. It's so tangled. And so here you have two characters, one of whom goes for the greater good and wants to opinionate and, let's say, rule the masses. We have another one who the only viewpoint that matters is the one in front of you. The one-on-one, the one that you can actually influence. And so it's going to bounce back and forth between many perspectives, and a lot of what you see right now that you think you know what you're seeing because classic fantasies taught you what to expect. It's going to blow up in your face, and I'm ready for it. So yeah, I definitely set out to do that.
Yeah.
Because of the experience I had. I knew I was mixing time periods because I knew, due to the way that this planet works, that these things are set on, there were going to be certain things that wouldn't work there. The way we did our Earth history wasn't going to work. So in order for me to put together what is present in the society, I had to mix and match some time periods. So certain things would progress because certain things would work and certain things would be stopped at a different level. So in order to make all those various things feel real and fit them together in a different kind of puzzle, I had to do a lot of period research. And one of the researches I had to do was war.
Wow.
So I set out to study war tactics in every single campaign globally from about the Romans forward till gunpowder took over.
Wow.
And changed how things were done. So I was reading books and books and books, and this wasn't done on Google. That didn't exist then. I read books.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was getting treatises copied by friends of mine who had PhDs from university libraries, and then they'd FedEx me the papers.
Wow.
And I would read the extracts. Right as I was finishing all of this, I went and saw a docudrama in black and white called Culloden. You can turn this on. It's on YouTube. You can find it. And it took apart the Battle of Culloden Field in Scotland, where the clans clashed with the English for the last time. It was really the destruction of the clan system in Scotland, which actually had more in common with certain beliefs that the Native Americans held. It's fascinating when you take it apart. That documentary took that battle in full black and white and exposed it for what it was.
Yeah.
A complete horror show. It was a massacre. From inept leadership, from the inept system of government that they had, the inept system of you basically had starving Highland clans people who had to be there, were forced to be there, who were freezing to death, who were never given the order to charge, and then were blown apart by English artillery. It was a complete bloody mess.
Wow.
And having worked in music, having played bagpipes, having done Scottish ballads, having done, the whole Bonnie Prince Charlie and all the poetry and the massive amount of novels and literature that's out that glorify that singular period, it just ripped the veil right off. And I walked out of there furious.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, how many other things have we been told that we were not given the perspective to know what really went on? And so backing the telescope up over all those campaigns and all of those military campaigns that I studied, I saw that every single one of them lied to us the same way. Either it was superior numbers ripped somebody apart, superior tactics ripped apart. Some piece of luck went exactly the wrong way for one side or the other. Or it was a Pyrrhic victory and both sides ripped each other apart and nobody gained anything. And the end was the victor wrote the history and made it seem like we won because we were just.
Yep. Yeah. As you said, the victors write the story, right? So
I said, this is over. And fantasy is the biggest offender.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tear it apart.
I love
and I'm going to make you feel it. I'm going to make you feel it. And it's not grimdark.
Yeah.
It's not dark. It's full spectrum. For every dark, you're going to get an incredible illuminating light.
Yeah.
It's full spectrum balance.
Actually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I said, despite the reader's tendency to focus on the dark, they discount. It's funny to watch the responses of people reading the series, how often the flip side is discounted. It doesn't seem to carry much weight, even though page by page it's all there.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think people's natural fascination with the darkness is probably what makes them focus on it more. Possibly, I don't know. But one thing I really actually appreciated about your Curse of the Mistwraith is, there, and maybe this might be a good time to start getting into
spoilers. Yeah, I said we're going to start to edge toward a little bit of spoilers. So
yeah, it's like I need a spoiler flashing sign or something. Warning.
So how far are you going, to the end of the book or the middle, so people know whether they're safe to, if they're still in progress?
I guess since we're talking about war, I figured this might be a good segue to kind of go to where the characters end up at the end of the book.
So you're going to go full spoiler there. Okay, people, you were warned.
So I one thing I really appreciated about Curse of the Mistwraith is how battles are looked at from both POVs. And when you look at it from Erathon's perspective versus Lycir's perspective, you see both of their actions are justified according to them. So that was one thing I just really appreciated. So even when it explores darker concepts like, using children in a battle or something like that, right? Then you're seeing it from both of their POVs, and you get a completely different view on what Erathon's decision was, what Lycir's decision was at that point.
And where Erathon chose not to endorse it, but was overruled.
Right.
So there's three perspectives here being torn apart.
Yeah.
The people caught in the middle, the uninvolved person forced to take charge, or what, you know, the whole sequence of knowing what would happen if he vacated the field.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't so much did he justify what he did, it was like, you pick the lesser of two evils. What's good? There is no good here. There is no solution that he could see.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And in fact, actually, that kind of goes to piggybacks on another theme that I feel like is explored in this series, which is, and really you see that the most, I think, from Erathon's character, is the perspective of free will versus something that is preordained, or something that is predestined to happen. In that Erathon has to choose between, his love of music and then also his kind of responsibilities. I would love to kind of know, I would love to explore that a little bit more with you. Is that something that that we can expect to see further explored in future entries? And yeah, I would love to kind of know more about your perspective on how you explored that in
Don't we all that pursue the creative arts get hounded for doing something frivolous? Don't we always get hounded that we ought to do something serious?
Yeah.
Don't we feel like, my parents did cover my college education. Didn't I feel pressured to say go into sciences as opposed to, because that was more acceptably. Totally. Society looks on the arts as an expenditure on the balance sheet. How much does it cost to get this done? How much money are you going to make? The arts are downplayed, and yet show me the person on this planet who doesn't relieve themselves with a story or a movie, or use narrative, or use, Don pointed out one thing that was fascinating. A daughter was having an argument with a father that he knew, and the father was disparaging her for wanting to go to art school, that it was a meaningless pursuit. And she said, stop. Look at that billboard. That hired an artist. Listen to that person on the radio. That required a voice actor. How many books did you just read? That required, so she pointed out that there is no sector of our society that is devoid of some form of the arts.
Yeah.
Or narrative performance, or music, or whatever. Show me the person that can live without music. Unless you're deaf, you don't. So, yeah, we have to, everybody who's born with that creative ability to make something has that pressure on them. That grow up. Yeah. It's childish. You can't do what you want. Your imagination is wasted when you get older. Apply it to something in the real world. Hold on now, every single invention, every single development in society, every single thing we did, forward or backwards, came from an idea, and an idea did not come from reality.
Right. Yeah. It's true.
Didn't happen. I just had to laugh. Here's Grok. It made that black hole logo. Did you see that thing?
No, I didn't actually.
They took the photographic image of a black hole and made it into a graphic image, and this is Grok's AI logo. And I'm going, they just picked a black hole. They suck everything in and give nothing back.
If there wasn't something more,
creativity gives us the things that break the envelope. Creativity gives us every single thing that breaks progress and makes us different than just an animal with 4 paws. Creativity and imagination is everything that makes us human, and the ability to act on it. So how dare these people tell us that it's a negative choice, or it's childish, or it should be put away when you're done high school, or fantasy is for kids, or senile people. Go on, get out of here. So that conflict of Erathon's in this book is absolutely that. When is your creativity the most important thing, or is it a frivolous pursuit all the way along?
Yeah.
And like I said, I made my list of everything I hate about society, and that's right there.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
So yeah, you must have feelings on that. How many people tell you that what you're doing doesn't have meaning, or it's frivolous, or it's,
Totally. Yeah.
We fight it every day of our lives.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And it's like, I think this, the way the commerce part of the business part of art, which becomes that necessary, walk hand in hand thing. It can be very, I feel like there's always a tussle between the two, and it's because the people who deal purely in the business side of things, or the people who are
No,
looking.
that's not it. That's not
Yeah.
it. It is dangerous because it cannot be controlled.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
They can't replicate it. They can't do it. They can't control it. They can only try to fence it in with monetary this and that and jam it in a corner, and it will not be caged.
Yeah.
It cannot be caged. So they're frightened of it. It takes me back to college when I was learning to paint, and I had 30 by 40 inch oil paintings on my wall, one of which is behind me.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
People would walk into my living quarters and they would look around, and they had 3 reactions to what they saw on my walls, which was dragons and wizards. They would say, "Oh, you take drugs." Never in my life have I ever. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Fine. Box it that way. Or, "Oh, just like Tolkien. No, I won't look anymore because it's just like Tolkien. I put it in a safe little envelope."
Right. Yeah.
Slipped it in a drawer. Yeah. Or the rare one would go, "Oh my God." And they would look at what they were seeing, and they would actually dare to fall into it and respond to it for what it was. And that was probably 5%.
Yeah.
And the deniers were 60%, the ones you're on drugs.
Yeah.
They're scared of it because somewhere along the line, somebody broke their fingers for daring to think outside the box, or not conforming, or imagining something that this isn't real, or, somebody else's disappointment crapped all over your parade and you let it happen. And you never grew up enough to rebel against that box you were stuffed into when you were 3, 5, 6, 10, wherever it was. I don't care. What institution put you there, you got there.
Right. Yeah. And it's an easy trap to fall in. I think you're right. I think it does come down to people don't understand it. They can't tame it, and that scares them. I think there's probably also a regret of not having been able to do it in their own life. And I think it's easier to put things in boxes. It's like the idea of like, you see, but you don't, or you look, but you don't see, you hear, but you don't listen,
You have to wear my disappointment. And I'm not buying it. So I'll give anybody a sledgehammer to break that.
Yeah.
So that conflict of the character that was gifted phenomenally with music, and what you're going to enjoy where that takes you. But I don't drop my hammers quickly. I'm going to take you through it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I was going to ask you actually about the music element of it. I know how big a role music has played in your life, and you play the bagpipes and everything. And was there a reason you chose music for Erathon? Is that kind of how you always wanted to explore that character in the context of music? Or did you also think of other kind of maybe artistic pursuits for Erathon? Or was music kind of always the first choice for you?
I've always loved music. I've always, luckily, been exposed to a house that had a piano in it. My grandmother played. My grandfather learned to play waiting for my other grandmother to put her makeup on to go out. And he became quite accomplished at playing the piano. When I was 9, my father brought home a really cheesy guitar. I'm talking the kind that you got for like $15, and it had the strings this far off the fretboard, and you'd slit your fingers to the knuckle trying to play it. And he turned us loose on it, and he said, "Whoever learns to play it gets to keep it." And I went at that thing, 9 years old. My fingers wouldn't reach. The strings were horrible. It had terrible sound. It was just a piece of junk. But by the end of 2 months, my brothers had dropped out, and I was still going. So eventually I got a better guitar.
Yeah.
I've always loved music, but I also realized that there's so many things I love to do. I have immense curiosity, and it's led me so many different directions, from big outdoor pursuits, riding horses, you name it. I've done it. If I wanted to do it, I did it. I've sailed offshore. I've done it all. If I didn't want to do it, it stayed in the crap basket, like golf and like dancing. No thanks. So
Fair.
I realized I couldn't have the killer instinct for everything. So music had to kind of go by the boards. If I was going to write and draw and paint to put the covers on, music had to stay somewhat the hobby. But then I fell into a really lucky, I was playing the bagpipes just because I liked them. And I was working way too hard for the person who was teaching me. And he said to me, you're practicing way too hard for my skill. So you're going to go and you're going to take lessons from this guy down in Delaware. And you're going to have to drive an hour to do it, but you're working hard enough to deserve it. So I got the opportunity to take lessons from a world-class player.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had to drive an hour. He never charged me a penny for a lesson.
What?
All he cared about was if you practiced. If you didn't practice, you were out the door, gone.
Wow.
But if you played and you worked, so I ended up studying under Roddy McDonald for 20 years or more. And then I came back because he retired down here. So I got to learn from a player that way outstripped my ability. But he was a real musician. And I could hear what he was doing, but I was too self-conscious to let go and fall into it to be able to accomplish that. I'd have moments and he'd go, why can't you do that all the time?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I would get too self-conscious, too aware of the mechanics of what was happening, or that somebody was judging me. So I competed to get over my nerves. That enabled me to be a total introvert and talk to you right now on this channel and not be a jerk. Because music terrified me. So I learned to play in public, and I have a beautiful collection of stringed instruments upstairs. So it made sense to write a character who I could understand what they were doing, but physically I couldn't replicate it because I was too self-conscious. I was just brought up too self-conscious, too aware of criticism, too aware of, and so I could never reach that height, but I could sure hear it. And I could hear it when I was alone. I can play alone like that.
Wow. Yeah.
But the minute there's an interference going on, boom, I'm gone.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. And a sensitivity of hearing, because I could hear bats. I could hear extreme high frequency. Yeah. It's been a curse. Well, they used to have those high frequency alarms in stores, and they would leave them turned on in the day, and I couldn't handle it. I'd walk in the door and it would just shatter me. Jeez. Put me on the floor with a headache in 5 minutes. So I hate shopping as a result. So, you know, I tried to pour some of that into the character. It's a life I could never live.
I find it, you know, that's one thing that really resonated with me, pun intended, is the idea of, you know, how informed the musical conversation in the Curse of the Mistwraith comes across. So I absolutely love that. I'm just looking at the comments because I got so carried away. I was actually not like paying as much attention to these, but they were saying, love that you play guitar as well, Jenny. Definitely comes through. Yep. Some of the passages where Arathon is playing in the books. Yeah. And then Matt says, no, Arathon golfer plot twist.
No. Oh, come on. This is a sport that's built around you hit a ball, you jump in a little car, and you chase it. Nah, not for me.
I guess, yeah, let's dive into maybe a little bit more of the book itself, and just kind of talk a little bit about the Fellowship of the Seven, you know. I would love to kind of know what was the impetus for creating those characters. They're all very distinct. And I just kind of love the way the interplay of them, and then also how they kind of serve as, for example, for Arathon as that foil to his musical adventures, you know. But also there's kind of that idea of destiny or something that's preordained. So yeah, how did you come up with the seven?
Nothing. First of all, nothing's preordained. There are probabilities and their tendencies and their choices, and there's offshoots of choices, but you'll read, you'll find out. How did I come up for the seven? Of course, I had read Tolkien, and of course, I loved Gandalf, and of course, I didn't want to fall into the trap of writing that again.
Sure. Yeah.
So I said, fine. There were two things that bothered me about fantasy. Remember, I said I made my hit list. All these powerful wizards that were so powerful, but they never could quite do anything. They never could quite have enough power to accomplish much. You know, we got Gandalf throwing burning pine cones. It's like, come on, buddy, you can do better than this. So that irritation of, you got this powerful wizard and everybody goes, this is a powerful wizard, but they never are powerful. They never are.
Yeah.
So I said, one, I don't want to fall into the wizard trope. So I'm going to make 7 of them. And now I have to differentiate their personalities, or all blur together. And they're going to fight with each other, and they're going to be distinct. Second of all, if you read the passage where Arathon encounters Asandir for the first time in Curse of the Mistwraith, it puts him on his knees. And this is not in character for this person. If you add up all the other reactions that this guy has to everything that's happening around him, no shit puts him on his knees.
Yeah.
You read why it sucked the floor right out from under him. It says right on the page how powerful this entity is that he's encountered. Readers just pop right over it. So, okay, these 7 are that powerful. Read that passage again and open your eyes and watch for it, because it will unveil. The question becomes, why do they act? And when they act? And what considerations are they putting into play? Because there are no constraints, there are considerations. And when you encounter, everybody goes, oh, I'm reading Malazan and these guys are so powerful and it's all over the page. And when you encounter the powerfulest powers in this world, they walk very, very softly. Oh, and your first introduction to Seth-Veer.
Yeah.
When he's seeing across worlds, it says right out how much power he has. Assumptions carry right over it.
Yeah.
So I said, these guys, when they choose to move, there aren't any limits. So watch for it. That'll be one of the fun things to watch going forward in the series. But the laughter that I have is all that stuff is in volume 1, guys.
Yeah. Wow.
But you missed it because you were focused on something else more important. So that's why when you read this series and then you go back and you read any single volume again after you complete another section, it's going to read like a whole different story, because the tension points are going to change because your perspective is wider.
See, with this new kind of new vantage point based on this conversation, I definitely want to look at some more some passages of Curse of Mistwraith again before going on to book 2. And I guess my question to that point was, are there any, I know you had mentioned those specific passages with Asandir and Seth-Veer. Are there any other places that you feel people that are common that people miss the first time around, that like, hey, you might want to go revisit?
Don't worry about it, because if you miss it the first time, you miss it, and your assumptions are going to carry until the second time, and then it's going to kind of sit you up. And if you miss that one, the third time is going to be the 2x4 in the face. You will not be able to go through this series and not get it. So it isn't that, quote, nothing happens or it repeats the ground. No, it repeats the ground at a different vantage point that's going to blow the doors off, the floor off, and pop the roof.
Yeah.
Completely, until some of those scenes are written so far outside the envelope, language didn't go there. And so why did the final volumes take me so long? That's why. Language doesn't have words for what had to be put on the page. And I had to slow you down enough to be able to cram enough symbols in words to say what was happening for you to get it. So you don't have to rush back and reread, but if you do, you will see it. You will see it.
Yeah. I'll be very curious
when Seth-Veer first looks across the worlds and sees that sword, it says power great enough to shatter mountains. Right on the page answered his call to see what he was seeing. So, and that's not even the part of it. The one you want to really look at is when Arathon met Asandir face to face the first time, and it put him on his knees. Why? And to me, that's like a huge red flag, because if you know the character, you know this guy doesn't break.
Yeah.
So why? But people aren't accustomed to reading prose that deeply or actually seeing what's on the page that carefully. Often it's the readers who don't have English as a first language who get the series the best.
Really?
Because they cannot skip a word.
Right. That's fascinating.
If they don't bounce off it because they were too frustrated, or they said, these characters are acting illogically. You can't say that until you know what those characters' moral high ground is.
Yeah.
You have no idea the contour from which they're coming to make that decision. So to your vantage, it's stupid or illogical, or why didn't they do it this way? You don't have the context to know yet. And the series will give it to you. So for the patient reader that's willing to bear with it and say, okay, I don't know everything yet, I don't have to know everything yet, that reader's going to get there.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. You know, I was thinking about, like, one thing that really kind of struck me about this book is the kind of subversion of expectations. Because when you think of Curse of the Mistwraith, you know, you think about the Mistwraith aspect of it. And one thing that I loved about this book is, you know, the containment of the Mistwraith was, of course, one part of it, but and an important part, but the implications of the Mistwraith and kind of the effect it has on Lysair and Erathon was just fantastic to me. Like, I love how that kind of sows the seeds of their strife between each other. And I guess my question for you was, how much did their preconceived notions of each other from the outset play a role in that? And then how much did the Mistwraith's role play in, I guess, deepening their, you know, already their, like, Lysair's prejudice against Erathon, for instance?
You'll have to read on and find out.
Okay.
It will be parsed very, very, very specifically all the way up until the last volume. You will see layers that were never there. They were there. They were there, but you know, from where you are right now, ground floor, it's the old concept of divide and conquer. The Mistwraith was threatened, so it divided, so it could conquer.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's exactly what's going on.
That makes sense.
And why do we let ourselves be divided? We get played on by our own innate prejudices, our own innate flaws, our own innate knee-jerk assumptions.
Yeah, yeah.
That's how we get divided. We never stop to dismantle those and take them apart.
Right.
So that whole, again, on my hit list of things I hate about society, divide and conquer was right up there.
Yeah.
Because we get manipulated on that all the time.
Yeah. Tale as old as time, for sure.
The minute you stop doubting something, you are a tool for whatever fits that template. The minute you stop questioning something and you accept a belief as this is it, you just became a tool for whatever fits that. And if you don't ever look outside that, watch where you're stepping, because you're blind. And I'm not knocking anyone that believes in something. By all means, believe in what you believe, but also take time to look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because the inconsistencies are going to crop, and unless you blind yourself to them, you're never going to question, or you're never going to mature that belief, or you're never going to temper it. And that's scary.
Yeah. Eric just had a question here that was pretty apt for what we're talking about. It says, Janny, have you seen some of the reactions modern readers have to your writings, showing that they aren't able to see outside the box?
All the time.
Yeah.
Go read the reviews. And that's okay, because you know, we're individuals for a reason. There's something for everybody. We get what we're ready to see, or we get what we want to see, or we're, you know, I have plenty of books I don't like too. And I can give you my reason why, but it's not going to be valid for someone else. So be your individual self. But yeah, also the ones who can't see outside the box usually fall apart and back off by the midpoint, because they're unwilling to go to the level that the series is going to take them. And one of the earlier, you know, you asking me, was there any passion in this book that I felt was oddly overlooked? And the one that completely mystifies me is the one that takes place after the Battle of Takwaran and the settling of the Shades. Because they always focus on the brutality and the complete slaughter that happened, but they don't see what happened after that. When Erathon calls in the Shades and he gives them back their deaths without the violence. Yeah. It's on the page what he did there. And you see it through Hallyran's eyes. You see it through the Masterbard's eyes. Right. And you see the Masterbard force that awakening on Chaol, which changes Chaol's life. But that scene is so overlooked, and it's like, that's why I say this is a full spectrum fantasy. For every dark depth, there's going to be a shattering light that follows it, but the people miss the light side. And that's true of life. People discount the good news. You can't run a news outlet on good news. It'll fail. It's been tried.
Yeah.
So we look at what threatens us. We look at what frightens us in much more depth than we look at things that would raise us up and lead us out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so as far as misunderstood passages, you'll come to some of them, and we'll, if we ever have another discussion like this, I can say what was missed. And it's often where reviewers will get really angry and say this was written stupid or unnecessary. There was a reason and they missed it, because we discount what would lift us out. We discount the exit ramp from the nihilism that drags us under. We discount the exit ramp that would reject cynicism, which is pretty much saying, give up now, because why be disappointed some more?
Yeah.
And that's giving up hope. That's giving up the fight. That's giving up imagination. That's giving up, there's another way to do this. That's giving up the fight right there. It says, this is all ugly and there is no more. It's the biggest set of blinders I've ever seen in my life. And so many people fall into that, and you can't. To me, that's the battle that we face to live our lives, is not to fall into giving up for whatever reason.
Yeah. Great comments here coming in. That scene where Erathon settled the shades shattered me. I felt that this act added to Erathon losing access to his mage gift. I had a question actually about also Varaine, because I know Varaine's quite a bit explored in the Gallant, and less so in this particular entry. Is that a character that we'll see a lot more of in future entries, or is that more of a kind of a periphery character, would you say?
You will see more of Varaine.
Cool.
But I'm not going to say how, because I got my roll of duct tape here. I'll let you figure and find that out yourself. And you're going to get chapter 2 of Varaine and a whole lot more in the Guardian when I get it perfected, and it's getting closer. So the reason why I wrote the Gallant was because of a reader got caught on that one line where they said, here's this guy and he's dressing in a fashion that's X number of centuries out of date. He was a gallant, he was a dandy, he was a bit of a, and they said, I want to know who this guy was. I want to know his backstory.
Wow.
So I said, well, it's a real interesting pickle of a backstory.
Yeah.
Because he didn't start out what he began, what he ended up at all. And so that's how the Gallant, but it took me 10 years to write that.
Wow. Yeah.
Writing a backstory into the historical matrix, which is hundreds of thousands of years. There's more backstory to this world than you are ever going to see in the books. I have to take every little piece and make sure that it all fits. And I have to take that moment in history and I have to define it all the way across all the platforms, so I don't inadvertently leave something out.
Yeah.
So one little character's regional tempest touches everything else. So it's as much work or more as writing a full novel and a half to write a short piece. And that's why they read so dense. That's why so much is in there.
Yeah.
It's because that work has been done. So it's much easier to start a clean slate and start a brand new novel, totally different world, than to fit something into the existing matrix that this series was set.
That makes sense. Yeah.
The difference is I didn't use all of that. It definitely affects everything that was written in this book. I can see where the connections are, but I didn't sprawl it. So you see the 300 million thousand years, whatever, of prehistory and future history that comes out of this, but it definitely exists. I got piles of notes.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's one thing that is always, for readers, we're getting a sliver of the author's intent, even with lore, even with backstory, because like you said, not everything makes it into the books, right? It kind of informs what happens in the books, but the basis by which those notes are written, the research is done, and things are compiled, it is a cross section of that, and not,
Yep.
not the entire, not the
Yeah,
whole.
the restraint was that what I didn't need to show, I didn't show.
Yeah.
But I think reading The Gallant ahead of Curse of the Mistwraith helps get you through that introductory stage, because you're meeting a character you already know, whereas the new reader doesn't understand why that scene is in there. In fact, my editor wanted it cut. They wanted that whole section with Varian cut out. And I said,
Really?
Nope.
Yeah.
Can't be done, because in order for the whole rest of the series to work, everything needs to be in there on the ground floor.
Yeah.
And you couldn't just pop this in later.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have connected. So, yeah, Varian plays a pretty significant part. He's never a central character, but you certainly will see him again.
He's definitely one of my favorites, even from reading The Gallant. So I'm really excited on a personal note to explore.
He will show up again, and you will
Yeah.
see some of the qualities of who he is show up again. It all is going to fit. So I always recommend to people, do read the shorts. Try not to go into arc 4 particularly without having read all of the shorts.
Okay.
But mind the guidelines and don't start them too soon. Some of them you want to wait a little bit. Especially don't read Black Bargain until you've finished arc 3.
Okay, I see.
Because it might spoil some of the tension in arc 3. You can, it won't kill anything, but it will take away some of the mystique.
Got it.
But the events that take place in those shorts are not going to be repeated verbatim in the series. They may be touched upon, and so the shorts expand and unfold more understanding of how that one point that may be touched upon in the series plays through. So you don't need them, but they definitely add a lot.
Fascinating. Yeah. And for those of you who are on the Discord, by the way, as well, just to jump in, I'm going to put the reading order and everything like that that's on Janny's website in the pinned comments in our Wars of Light and Shadow read along section. So you all can kind of refer to that as well. And we could start peppering in some of those smaller pieces amongst the novels as well, if you all want. But I think, it's always fun to be able to see character expansions, or, something that's touched upon, like you said, Janny, expanded a little bit more full tilt in these side stories or in the novellas.
In most cases, the shorts were written because I saw readers jumping over or assuming that, like One Finger Piano, this event in history was very simplified.
Yeah.
And it was so oversimplified, it was doing the story an injustice. So I wrote out stories to fill in those blanks, so you realize that's not just jumped over. Like there's a whole section in the FAQ, which be careful you dig into there because there are spoilers, but there's a whole section on how the feud between Arathon and Lysa's family began. And it wasn't simpler. It wasn't one event. It was a series of miscommunications, misadventures, bad luck that got exacerbated by distance, because the world is all water. And communication passed very slowly. So a storm that wiped out something over here wasn't going to, the truth of that matter might be gone. The people who initiated some piece of corruption might be dead. So the story got lost. So the shorts were written to expand that. People assume, the Mistwraith came in and the whole world went under. It didn't. It took 100 years. There was a 100-year battle to hold that thing in check.
Wow.
After the gate was closed. And so there was a massive number of events that kept tripping things. So it gained a little more ground and a little more ground until it hit a tipping point. It gained a whole lot more ground, and more factions and more existing things on this world were affected by it at different times. So it wasn't a simple thing. So I didn't play war games in this universe. It all came out of here. And nobody saw what was developing, unlike many of these fantasies that were written with literally war game campaigns, where you read, oh, wow, this took place 3,000 years before that. It was a war game campaign. And that's how the stories were connected. I never did that with this world. So it isn't out in the open. That's why the books don't sprawl and jump around. I took one little section of history and focused.
Wow. Yeah. That makes sense. That makes sense. I'm also curious actually about, because I was mentioning Varane as one of my favorite characters. Like, do you have favorite characters when you're writing this? Is it the character you're currently writing to, or do when you were first writing Curse of the Mistwraith, did you have a favorite, and then did that evolve over time? Like, I would love to know kind of more
People
about.
coming into this series saying it's going to be how would I put this? Oh, well, there are two sides and they're going to get equal treatment.
Mm.
Like I'm going to fabricate equal treatment. They didn't read the prologue carefully. Go to A.P. Canavan's analysis of the prologue, and he wrung every single little drop out of every single word that I very carefully put in that prologue.
Wow.
The original prologue was 4 pages, and that's ridiculously long. I melted it down to those paragraphs. So everything that is put in those little 3 paragraphs bears a lot of weight. And he absolutely stripped the analysis down to the bone. He got it all. Every little bit that he found in there is actually what I wrote. So again, when readers go, oh, well, there were supposed to be 2 evenly treated sides of the conflict, the prologue says that that's not necessarily what you're going to see.
Sure. Yeah.
It totally isn't. So I set out to write exactly what I wrote, and people's prejudices overwrite what they think they want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
There will be moments in this series where you're going to see what the pressures are, what Lysair's internal pressures are, and you're going to sympathize to a greater or even lesser degree with the choices that he makes.
Yeah, yeah.
But did I sit down to favor one character? No, I was trying to take a story and say, this is how the thread of intent gets lost. This is how things get overwritten by assumptions. This is how people's prejudices play against what actually happened on the page. It's like fighting on the arts. You're fighting against that assumption that society has that what you do is frivolous and meaningless.
Yeah.
When if you took it out tomorrow, they would be lost. Nothing would get invented without imagination. So read what's on the page, and for God's sake, get your pre-assumptions out of the way. And then you'll see what was actually written there.
Yeah.
And one of the themes that's going to play very hard is pretty much bare knuckle shown you in Muriel's analysis when she sits down with Lorenda and Ilera. Mm-hmm. And they analyze the prince's characters. And Muriel says Arathon is the more dangerous because compassion will not answer to logic. Right. And he has limitless empathy, and eventually the strain of trying to navigate through exactly what he had to navigate through in the war at the end of this story, where what was happening was not at all what he wanted. Not a bit. Did he endorse using these children? He went right out and said, don't.
Yeah.
And then they said, we have to do this much to survive. How do you argue with that?
Right. Yeah.
So that rock and a hard place kind of quandary, whereas justice can easily be answered to logic. You can always find a reason why this cause was just.
Yeah.
You can pick and choose pick your flowers to make your arrangement, to make it seem like might makes right. It's been done throughout history. So
yeah.
It's all on the page. Lysair's going to follow a different course because he was brought up to view the world in a different way, and he was predestined to favor justice. He is going to be able to cut the mustard between what is, quote unquote, a justifiable casualty.
Yeah, yeah.
The other character can't do that.
Right. Yeah.
So am I favoring one or the other? I think I'm following their precepts. And are they willing to change their precepts? What precepts can they change? Mm-hmm. If you're born an empath, you really can't get rid of that, short of drugging yourself out of it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, if you're one of these people that you're in a room and you know what you think, and then somebody else walks in the room and your compass changes because you're empathetic, how do you know where your boundaries are? And unless you create a boundary, unless you shut them out some way, And so the choice put to Arathon, do you shut out the music? Do you deafen what Afsan Dir showed you in the Pebble at Kayath Al-Kayan? Do you deafen that and lose what drives your musical talent and have a more comfortable life because you cut that part of yourself off? So there's many, many questions philosophically raised in these books, and I don't know why they're walked over and, you know, this fantasy series is so philosophical and this one's never mentioned.
Oh man.
Because it's all there, but
yeah,
it's okay. It's okay. It is what it is. But I know what I put on the page.
Well, I personally, you know, because I've watched a bunch of your live stream discussions and things like that, even before reading The Wars of Light and Shadow. And so I already had a little bit of an insight into your approach to things and also your innate philosophical approach to things. And so to me, it came through very much so in the writing. And that's the kind of stuff that I personally love. Like, I love when there isn't necessarily something cut and dry, and it forces not only the characters, you know, interactions to evolve the way they feel about a certain situation, but it forces the reader to expand their worldview in the process. So I personally feel that's one of the highlights of the series so far, you know.
How can you sit here and revere, quote, Western higher education and history books when you sat at the feet of an elder in another culture on the other side of the world and listened to them recite 20,000 years of their history that was passed down orally? Is their viewpoint more valid or less valid just because they don't have books?
Right.
The perspectives that we have available to us are millions, but we seldom take advantage of looking through another telescope.
True. Yeah.
And we're sitting here in the middle of a country where very few people have even gone outside of our national borders. The amount of lack of perspective is freaking staggering.
Yeah.
So that's part of why before I sat down to write these books, I went travel. Big time. I spent every nickel on a shoestring.
No better education than that. Yeah.
So, you know, how can you even talk to some people because they lack the grounding to understand what you're even saying? So isn't it not surprising that often we come to a book and don't understand what an author put on the page?
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's one of the games that Gene Wolfe plays with in Book of the New Sun.
Right.
He absolutely plays havoc with your perspective.
Yeah.
And has a jolly good time doing it. Yeah, it's not a book that you read for emotional satisfaction. It's completely coldly intellectual.
Yeah.
But playing with that sense of perspective until you're inside out and upside down and you don't know what the heck you're looking at unless you pay attention, and then maybe you have an idea what you're looking at, but you still can't parse, is this fantasy, science fiction? Is it future history? Is it past history? Except for little tiny clues on the page that suggest.
Yeah. ZK says, I love the scene where Arathon stayed in one of the 4 towers representing the pillars which make society function. I teared up reading that scene.
Yeah, and one of them has fallen.
Yeah. Brilliant. It's there's so many things to unpack, I feel like, even just reading this first one. I'm excited.
Which one has fallen is the King's Tower.
Sorry?
Which one has fallen is known as the King's Tower.
King's Tower. Yeah.
So it's, you know, there's so much symbolism stuffed into these pages.
100%.
And it's not done nihilistically. It's done very deliberately. And it's done, I hope, with a lot of hope and a lot of balance. Because you can't saw off the negative experience of life, but you also can't negate that there's so much more than that.
Yeah. Very different to, say, an R. Scott Baker or something like that.
Don't get me started. That book is for the people who want to read that book.
Yeah. Fair enough. I actually was curious also about the role of the kind of magic system in this and the idea of resonances and things like that. I'm curious because, you know, it's so fascinating to me, even just reading this first book. I feel like we got a glimpse of what that's going to be, and how much more of a role that will kind of be explored, I guess, in future entries.
Watch for it. Watch
Sorry?
for it. Watch for it.
You watch for it? Yeah, yeah. I was
All
gonna
right.
say.
Well, you know, you're a musician.
Yeah.
You know that when you strike one string, it kicks off a resonance. And if there's a string next to it that was not sounded, what's that resonance going to do to that string?
Right, right.
If it's in resonance with the note that you just played, that string, even though it wasn't touched, it's going to sound.
Yeah.
If you've ever played around with physics, and if you've ever messed with a standing waves in a water tank and shown the water through, or thrown droplets into a bathtub and watched the ring ripples cross, and with the resonance where the two waves cross, you get a bright dot, you get a point that is brighter. Pure physics, friend. Resonance. You sound a note and it brings resonant frequency into phase above and below the threshold of hearing. Harmonics are sounded even though you cannot hear them.
It's kind of a good analogy for
electrical frequency is electromagnetic. It has waveforms. It has pure physics.
Yeah.
So is there a magic system? It's all particle physics, quantum string theory.
Yeah. Wow.
It's all resonance. It's all physics. The difference is that I'm playing on concepts that there are multiple ways to access that. Music being one, sound, light, all that. And our instruments can't measure it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
We are blind. After a certain point, our physical scientific instruments cannot measure. But that doesn't mean that those principles stop just because our physical reality can't measure it. Our five senses cannot measure it.
Right.
So when I said writing outside the envelope, you'll get there.
Wow.
So, that's why, but there are multiple ways to access that. Quartz crystals vibrate at a resonant frequency. We use it in radio. We use it in the stylus of a record player. We use it everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's physics.
It's really a reflection of the way you approach characters, I think, as well, in terms of the way you approach magic system, like a magic system, or the idea of physics in this book, that something affecting everything else through its action or participation. That's really cool. Yeah, I'm so excited to see kind of how what bigger role it'll play, because I felt like we got a taste of it in Curse of the Mistwraith, and I was like left wanting more of that. So I'm so excited to see.
Just keep reading.
Yeah.
Just keep reading.
Yeah.
And it will continue to develop all the way.
I wanted to also interject a question here from Matt, who had mentioned, a friend of the channel and on Discord as well, who had mentioned he wanted to know, he loved that there's an in-depth glossary in this book. And did you have to kind of fight the publisher to include that kind of a thing, or is that something that he really liked that aspect of it, that there's a little bit more of a
back at the beginning? No, I didn't have to fight.
Yeah.
Because when Curse of the Mistwraith was published, I was coming off of the success of Mistress of the Empire.
Okay. Yeah.
So there was no argument about length. There was no argument about glossary. I got to put in what I wanted to. The mistake was that the publisher assumed they could market it the same way as the Empire series, and this is a totally different story.
Right.
And that has been the ongoing battle that I've had. And you guys here on YouTube are finally correcting course. It's fun. These books are finally reaching the audience. And so, if you meet somebody that said, oh yeah, I read the Empire trilogy and I was completely disappointed in Wars of Light and Shadows, try waiting a decade and try it again.
Yeah.
Because then you'll be ready for it. As far as why did I put the glossary in, I felt that the books were going to take a certain amount of time to be released.
Yeah.
And readers needed a way to go back and get a definition of what they were reading when they started a new volume. And I tempered the glossary in each volume to go up to the beginning of that book.
Yeah.
So don't read the glossary in a later volume. You might get a spoiler.
Oh, right. Okay.
And I also used it as a place to add in a little bit more depth. So if you're curious about something and you read it, you'll see a little bit more.
Yeah.
The other thing that I did in the glossary, which was not asked for, but I just did it. When I evolved the language for these books, I am not a linguist, okay? I'm no Tolkien. I'm not Philip Chase that knows all these pre-English languages and borrowed off that stuff. What I did was I built what I would call a language of power.
Yeah.
And so if you look at the Paravian words, first of all, it's a very musical language. It doesn't pronounce necessarily the way you think it might. It has a lyrical ring to it when it comes off. If you break down the root words, you will get the flow of power that forms whatever it is that you're saying. It is an energetic map. The language is an energetic underpinning of what that word does, how that word resolves into the physical, whatever it is.
Interesting. Yeah.
So when you break down the naming system, when you break down the prefixes and suffixes attached to that root word, you're going to get the flow of what makes that word function energetically. So the Paravian that is written for the book, you know, the names, it's devolved just a bit from the actualized form. So I put that into the glossary just as a tinker toy.
Yeah. Great.
Somebody who really is interested can dig into it and look at it. And, you know, I have pages and pages of translations and words that were never used for these books.
Yeah.
But there is, and where I do break down a phrase, it's like a couple of times people asked me on my private forum, you know, on Paravia, you can go join it. It's a public forum. You just have to sign up with your email. I've broken down some phrases as to exactly how that language of power fits together and flows.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty esoteric question. Most people don't give a damn. And that's fine.
I think some people here in the chat and me do. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Hi, Jake.
Hey, Jake. Good to see you, man. Thanks for stopping by. I've never felt the need to reference any fantasy novel glossary until reading Curse of the Mistwraith. Oh, yeah.
It was also my way of not putting in a story so far.
Yeah.
And I resisted doing that because I said every book is going to redefine what's in it. If you read the book carefully, you'll get everything you need. And then there's the glossary if you really get lost.
Yeah.
But I did start putting a story so far in, I believe it, Trader's Knot.
Okay.
Because at that point, everything in the ground floors was developed to the point where I did not need to repeat anything because I wouldn't say anything new. I would not be giving you a new perspective. And so what I did, instead of a story so far where I just summarized, I just did a yearly timeline.
Oh, cool.
This event happened in this year. This event happened in that year. This event's happened in that year. And now we're at this year starting this book. Yeah. So I have resisted a timeline for that reason. The glossary should take care of it.
Interesting.
Or the book itself will lend you a new perspective on that person, faction, or event where you will learn something new. Just read the book. It'll define it for you.
You know, to that point of how to ingest the story in terms of, you know, like you were mentioning at around book 7, I think Trader's Knot is book 7, right? Where certain things are not necessarily looked at from a different perspective or things like that. So I guess my question to you is, is there a better way to kind of take in the story, in the sense of, do you recommend people going, you know, one book after another, reading one book, letting it sit with you and marinate, reading the next one? And I guess maybe that question also applies specifically to Ships of Meriar, because I know the hardback edition has the 2 books in one, right? And then the paperbacks are just the books 2 and 3. So yeah, I guess if that question makes sense.
I don't steer people. Some people want to read this thing and they just want to know what happens.
Yeah.
Fine. Do that. If that's what blows your dress up, that's okay. The story will function based on what happens. Some people want to get the bottom blown out and really understand, where did I miss this?
Yeah.
You know, so it all depends. I don't have any preferential way. I think that's up to the individual, how they want to take it. You absolutely will get more from rereading it from a later perspective, but there's some people who don't want to reread. They get bored with it. So I'm not going to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
I will say that the tipping point, there's a tipping point in every book. You read Curse of the Mistwraith, you saw that tipping point at halfway.
Yeah.
Where the story is going to take an unexpected turn. This is true of every single volume except Song of the Mysteries. And in that case, the tipping points are happening at every chapter. Wow. It's like a salvo. That book could not be split. So there is no half point in Song of the Mysteries. It's pure finale. It is pure run to finish. It's pure, everything is coming to a head.
Yeah.
The only place I would say that I would recommend is, please, for the love of Mike, if you can, read Ships and Warhost together.
Oh, okay.
They were never meant to be split, and I was forced to it because of the length. I was forced to it because Britain wanted to send me on a book tour, and they committed to it.
Yeah.
And it was too much for me to finish weeding down and consolidating the language in the second half. It was fully written, but choosing the words and making everything work, I was just running out of time, and I was going till 2 and 3 in the morning every day. And I just hit the wall in exhaustion. And they said, we've committed to this. You have to turn in the book. So I said to Britain, the only way to do that is split at half point, because the budget was already set aside. And it was getting too long. When I showed them the length of the book, which was 1,600 drafts pages, she said, we would have had to do this anyway.
Oh, I see.
When it came to the US, I begged, pleaded, and cried to the publisher, do not split this book. Do not split this book for the sake of the reviews.
Yeah.
It needs to be seen as the single story it is. And they went the second mile. They produced Ships of Mary, or they sewed the binding so the book wouldn't fall apart.
Yeah.
I had editors who were behind me then. And the sad thing is, Los Magazine never bothered to review it. It never got reviewed in any of the major magazines. So wasted. But if you look at the ratings, say on a stupid platform like Goodreads, and you look at the split ratings, Ships to Warhost, and then you look at the ratings of Ships Warhost together, it's like 4.35.
Wow. Yeah.
As an unsplit book.
Right.
So I plead that you read it together, or at least you understand when you stop at Ships, you're going to get that midpoint climactic rush. It doesn't end in a bad spot, but you only got half a book. The entire finale, that convergency, is all in Warhost. The purpose for everything laid down in Ships occurs in Warhost.
Okay, good to know.
So that's what I'm hoping, is that people will get that, because it was never intended to be cut. And that's why I fought the War of the Ages to keep Song of the Mysteries from being split.
Right.
People would have been throwing the book out the window. You have to read that book start to finish as uncut, as it was written. And the payoff is, they made me sign off on the type size. So they said, if you don't split, your type size is going to be this. And I looked at the type size in House of Chains.
Yeah.
And it was the same size as House of Chains. I said, okay, I'm good. People get through Malazan, no problem.
Right.
They cheated on me. They reneged.
Really?
They put it one size down because they didn't want to reset the block text. They wanted to keep the pages the same as the hardback.
Oh.
So it's going to be too small. Initiate's trial. Be warned, it's 6-point type.
Okay.
I never saw it. I never saw the page proofs, even though contractually I was meant to. Production did it. The editors just said, oh, too bad. So, we need a reprint that's in. So try to get the large format of Song if you can before it's gone.
Good to know, actually.
And be aware that, if you don't want a magnifying glass, or you need older, you might have to get the e-version on top of your paper version for Initiate's trial, because the 6-point type is the phone book.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
It's unreadable.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of people dropped off the series then, because they said, we can't read this.
Oh, man.
And one started, and I couldn't get the publisher to correct the mistake, even though they agreed, oh, yeah, this is impossible to read, but it's my fault. It's too long. And then, never mind. I gave them a list of books that they published that were 100,000 words longer. Song of the Mysteries came out in 298,000, and there's regular books by other fantasies that shall go unnamed, but you've read them.
Sure.
And they are beloved, and they all run in the 300s and 400,000s, and it's not a problem.
100%.
So I don't know why this stick keeps getting brained over my head.
Oh man. Well, it's good to know actually. So maybe I'll probably get the hardcover, and then I'll probably also get the ebook.
Try to get it before it's
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah. Good call.
Because they're going to down the type size, and it won't be as bad as 6 Point that was in the Nishit's trial. That's inexcusable, but it's going to be bad.
Okay. Jake was saying, as much as I've craved Aethera since closing the back cover of Mistwraith, I think I've benefited greatly from giving it some time to sit in my brain for a while before heading into, jumping into book
that's
2.
all right. Just try not to do it between Ships and Warhost unless you really want that break, because they were meant to be together.
That's really good to know. Yeah, actually, because originally our plan was to read one every other month, and I was thinking, the original plan was, okay, book 2 in March, book 3 in May, but the idea
whatever you want to do, I'm not, it'll keep. The glossaries were adjusted in the print versions to compensate for that split.
I'll probably run it by the Discord crew, because I think a lot of people were excited to get back into the world. So maybe we can just do the 2 and 3 together.
Even if you split it, or even if somebody pushes ahead, it doesn't hurt, because when you re-examine, if the discussion runs slower than your reading speed because you want to push it in the series, you're still going to see things you didn't see for the review, for the discussion. So it never hurts if somebody's pushed ahead.
Yeah, 100%. Jake was asking a question here. Janny, would you say Ships and Warhost being one book in reality is comparable to books 9 and 10 of Malazan?
Well, no, because it's a whole lot shorter.
Yeah.
No, I don't like comparing it to the way other fantasies fit together, because mine were very deliberately set. You'll notice the format of the long chapter, 2 short chapters, and 3 one-lines.
Yeah.
That's all designed so that I didn't have to write out certain scenes. So each book has a split point where something's going to happen at that midpoint. It's going to shift the impetus, and the finale is always going to be in the second half.
Yeah.
And I'm always going to kick the ending every time. And the series arcs do the same thing, and the series entire does the same thing. The tipping point is in Peril's Gate. So arc 4 or 1 and 2 is a split. They were meant to be one, because that split point, that event that happens, that turns the finale, happens at the end of Warhost.
I see.
So it is a good pause point, but the ramp to the action is not finished. The down point of the roller coaster is all in Warhost. So you're kind of frozen at the top of the arc.
Yeah. I see. Well, good to know. I mean, I think I'll probably personally, I would rather read the 2 books together as one. So I think it would be cool.
I'm not going to penalize anybody for not, because it's a big investment to read them. The question there, the reason why we lost the hardcover of Storm Fortress was because in Great Britain, the hardcover was considered superfluous. It was printed for libraries. So they printed the large format paperback, which the USA never did. And then they printed just enough hardcovers for the libraries. So what happened was they decided at the time of Storm Fortress, that the printing run was too small to matter. Without telling me. They did not tell me that this happened. So the next thing I know, they canceled the hardback. And I was screaming, because I said at the time, a merger had killed my U.S. publishing program. We had lost all of the books in the United States, and I was waiting for the rights to reverse so I could retool and reestablish a home for the series. So there was no printing in the USA at all, not even scheduled. So I cried and screamed to Britain, will you please consider picking up the U.S. rights or accepting orders from the United States, because my U.S. readers will kick that few hundred books that you consider your cutoff point over that cutoff point by 4,000 copies. Just do it. But corporate plotting, I couldn't get it through. What also happened with the large format is they underprinted it, because they did no hardcover. They did a certain amount of large format paperbacks.
Yeah.
Because there was no hardcover in the US. US readers were ordering it anyway, and they ran out of books. And they refused to reprint, because at that time, there was a earthquake shift in publishing in the UK, where the middlemen that used to warehouse, they would order they would take in the press run. Basically, the publisher would print the books, they would ship it to the middlemen. The middlemen would distribute it to the bookstores until there was a reprint and they ran out. And then the middlemen warehoused the books. The middlemen all said, we're downsizing, we're cutting our expenses, we will no longer warehouse anything. So suddenly the publisher has to warehouse the entire press run.
Wow.
So it was a smashing mess because this happened all of a sudden. The publisher has new books coming off the press. They don't have enough warehouse space to put them. So they got to get rid of the older books as fast as they possibly can, which meant forklifting pallets of books and throwing them away. There was triage going on where they were wasting books to make room for next month's list coming off the press.
That's
Storm
insane.
Fortress got caught in the weeds with that one. We sold out in 3 months. My books did not get triaged and smashed up. The readers got all the copies. The problem was they refused to reprint because they had nowhere to put them.
Oh my gosh.
So they said, we're not going to reprint Storm Fortress. Sorry. We'll wait for the paperback.
How infuriating.
Right.
Man.
So that's why there are almost no large format copies. And that's why only the book club edition ever got printed, and British book club edition is tiny.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have yet to get anybody to listen to say print a large format hardback. Britain could do it right now and they would sell.
Yeah.
But they probably threw away the page templates to make the pages. They're probably gone.
Yeah.
So anyway, I guess we got to wait for a special edition. I guess we got to back sell the pages from a special edition to the publisher to get a new large format edition printed.
Yeah.
But yeah, the stupid decisions that I could never get corrected. And that's one of them. And honestly, I have been hit in the head with so many decisions like this. It just breaks me. And I didn't break. I just kept on going because the only thing to do is to keep on going. So readers, the only thing to do is keep on going. And if this series, if the cream really can rise and we reach enough readers, all this stuff can change.
Yeah.
But it will take an earthquake shift to do it. Because Storm Fortress at this point is considered backlist. Yeah. So if you look at a movie that did not make box because of whatever reason, distribution happens in film too, and it can kill a film.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's now considered a sleeper. How many sleepers have not been reissued for the theater or whatever reason? So that's the kind of earthquake shift we need to get. Yeah,
100%.
It would all be incredible, but you know, I'm waiting for an offer.
Yeah. Yeah. Hobby Vomit says broken binding would be so incredible.
Any of those small press special edition printers, I'm waiting for an offer.
Yeah.
Make it real, people. And you know, I've got all kinds of artwork. I've got all kinds of, I can even set up the page corrections that don't exist because it was typeset.
Right.
I can do all of that. So they're not going to be stuck buying it for a stupid price from the publisher. I'll figure out a way to get it into their hands to make it doable. But I need an offer.
Yeah. Yeah.
No
I
talk.
think we all need to make some.
No, maybe this will happen someday. I need an offer on the table because that if there isn't an offer on the table, it's not real.
Yeah. True. True. I feel the same way in composing. It's like until something is signed, it's not real. You know, that's always the kind of the adage I try to live by.
Talk is cheap.
Yeah.
Talk
but you know,
is cheap.
like I think it is interesting, especially now, like with the world of BookTube. It's like the series is getting so much more attention, and you know, people are talking about it. And I think I remember seeing you post a graphic of like, was it sales for the Gallant or something like that? It was like this, and then
yeah. Okay. Here's what my problem is right now.
Yeah.
In paperback in the United States, Amazon has no copies of Volume 1, Volume 2, or Volume 10.
Wow.
They're shit out of stock.
Oh man.
They have one copy left of, I think it's Grand Conspiracy, and like 7 of one of the others.
Yeah.
I just screeched at the British publisher. They said, oh, we're looking at upping the reprint threshold. They need to up it by times caboodles. Because every time I've gotten momentum and focus on this series from whatever reason, more than just BookTube, you know, the perpetual problem is they never have enough books printed or on the shelves or stocked in the US because it's an import and they got to put it on the container ship and there's a 4-month lag.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they have to wake up and they have to not just print 50 or 100 or get 50 books to the US. They need to do it and push it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you readers, go write your angry letters. It's HarperCollins, UK, Voyager, United Kingdom, London, and yell.
Yeah.
Because every time we gain momentum, it gets squashed because there aren't enough books to go around, and there's still a lot of people read these in paper print. And then the used market gets tapped out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the momentum stalls. And, you know, I get daily readers, oh, I tried to get this series and I couldn't find it.
Oh, man.
Or I
Yeah.
couldn't get it used without it being an exorbitant reseller's price.
Yeah.
So for the love of Mike, I don't know how to shake these people up. The only thing that's going to make sense is money. But customer pressure works. And that goes for an audiobook too. So getting the rest of the series. Yeah, that's the only thing that's going to shake them is to sell enough copies of book one or get enough people yelling and screaming. Because I'm not holding it up. They have the rights, and I've tried to get them back, and I have not had success.
So it's up to us, you guys. If for those of you who are tuning in,
it's up to the story to carry its own weight.
Yeah.
But it goes on the back of what readers respond to.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So
I'm heartened to see at least that like communities like this are taking notice of the books and enjoying it so as much as they are. So hopefully that's a sign of things moving in
it is but I'm just don't want to be stopped against the wall because there aren't enough print books on the ground
100%
to supply the need. And it's like I don't know how to make this wake up, because I warned them months ago that these read-alongs were happening. You guys were not quiet about announcing them. And I told them, shake your marketing department up, get ready for this. It's going to reach a lot of people worldwide. Prepare for it. And here we are. 1 and 2 are out of stock right away, and we aren't even a month in.
Jeez, wow. Yeah.
And by 4 months down the line, where will you guys be in your reading? See how that stagger effect?
Right.
And when the chains order a book or decide to stock a book on the shelves, they look at how many copies moved. Well, when you get these tremendous gaps, that's how you fall off auto reorder. That's why they're not on the shelves, because we can't ever sell enough books at once to get on the radar to hit the algorithm strong enough to bounce the ball. So these are just industry things. It has nothing to do with the story. The story is there for you. You can always get it in ebook. But how do you get a publisher to get over the hump of ebooks are low effort? If they can't get the paperback, they'll just buy the ebook.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I would cheer on that. I would love it.
Yeah. We need another Sun Eater for sure. Absolutely. And it's so worthy of it. So, yeah. Eric says, how are ebook sales?
Don't know, because I only see the royalties every 6 months, and that 6 months is for the 6 months before the 6 months.
Oh, right.
So, for instance, what you're doing right now, I will not know until December of next year.
Wow. I didn't realize the lag was that
because
huge.
June's royalties are for the period from June to December.
Yeah.
And then January to June will be what I get paid in December. Now, this made sense in the old school model because books went out to the bookstores and then there were returns.
Yeah.
So they had a factor for returns, and they had a factor for how many books they actually sold, because they didn't know how many books were going to get stripped. You know, they ripped the covers off the paperbacks, and that's called a return, and then they get credit. So the publisher pays for the paperback. Cover gets stripped, they lose that money. So they had to stagger the royalty statement to figure out what the returns were going to be. And there was always a reserve against returns. So they didn't even credit you how many sales you actually had.
Wow.
They had held a reserve because some of these books might come back. You know, what about the little old specialty bookstore in XYZ state that sat on a book for 5 years and then sent back a half a box of them? They got a factor for that. So the old antiquated royalty system does not take into account over-the-counter sales. Yeah. And they know it. Bookscan tells them what that is, but they darned if they're going to part with a penny before they have to. Sure. So yeah, I will not see the metric of what you guys are doing until next year.
It's very similar actually to music, because for royalties, like when I worked on some music for the Wheel of Time, I only that was for season 2 that came out in 2023, and I'm only now starting to see royalties for that. You know, and it's just like, yep.
So,
it's
you know,
always
you go
excited
and you
lads.
you rate and you review on Amazon and you say, oh, it doesn't matter if I don't. It does because of the algorithm.
Yeah, yeah,
The more things pour in, the more comments pour in. Even if it's one sentence, I love this book. It was fantastic because blank. That's
yeah,
it. That's all you have to do.
yeah,
It will bump the algorithm. And if you amass enough of that in a short period, now they start recommending your book. You start hitting the Amazon's own algorithm to push your book because they go, this is already selling.
yeah.
It'll hit our algorithm. We'll sell some more. So they want to make money, but it's tripped by reader interest. And that I can't control. I just
I
turned
think
myself inside out and wrote for the love of it to get the series finished. It's really up to the books to carry their weight now.
yeah, yeah.
And they will.
Absolutely. And I think it's great actually for everyone here who's listening in to know that actions as small as, you know, writing a review like that and kind of pushing it up in the kind of public consciousness is something that someone can do to actually an actionable step someone can do if they like the books to help push the ball forward for
all of your friends who have indie books.
Yeah.
Amazon will not even start to kick in until you've had 50 reviews, and you need them within a very short period after that book's released.
Right. Yeah.
So there's critical thresholds that have to be met, and that's the downside of the internet. The algorithm suppresses you.
Yeah.
If you're not, and anybody who's writing a book that's outside the envelope, that's not going to do the expected thing, that's got maybe a more original voice, maybe is playing around with a little more esoteric ideas, that doesn't fall in that nice, comfortable space where it doesn't push your brain, the algorithm is not going to reward the slower uptake.
Yes, right.
There are people that are still reading Song of the Mysteries because it's a big, long book. They didn't want to start it till they had a break, or they didn't want the series to end. And they're lagging on the report. Fully justified. I'm really happy they love it that much, but it's also dragging the algorithm down.
Wow. Yeah.
And that the publisher's going to look at how well did you sell your last book. That is the only criteria they look at to go forward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, movie industry works the same way.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
100%.
Same with music.
It's just the nature, the brutal nature of the entertainment industry. It isn't gatekeeping. It's the nature of the industry.
Totally. Totally. ZK says, I can't help but wonder how Amazon ebook sales will be impacted by them pulling the plug on downloading ebooks. Yeah.
I don't know. Probably your average idiot doesn't care.
Yeah.
Anything that I've got on my Kindle, I don't care because I experiment with my Kindle reads. I prefer a physical book.
Yeah.
But it'll just push it to other platforms. But you know, I don't know. I can't predict what's going to happen. So many changes have hit the publishing industry since the day the first book hit the ground.
Right.
If I'd known how many hurdles and needles I was going to have to thread to see this series to finish because of the changes that impacted publishing, my God, I might not have even started. I would have probably, because I wanted to produce this series so badly, but it's very daunting because the changes come one after the next, after the next, after the next.
I think it's better sometimes not to know too much before you start on an endeavor like that. I know for my music career, if I knew what would be involved in and you know how many hoops one would have to jump through and the politics behind it and all that stuff before I started, I doubt very much I would have gone into it. So I think it's
how badly do you want it?
Yeah.
Because you're wrestling with the giants. It's the ant versus the elephant. And you're going to get squished as many times as you manage to avoid it. Right. So how badly can you pick yourself up, dust off, and keep going?
True. Yeah. It's definitely developing a healthy relationship with uncertainty. It's always the way I like to look at it. No, this is just so wonderful, Janny. I mean, I could talk to you for hours. It's just so lovely having you here. And I just so appreciate you taking the time to chat with us all today. I know a lot of people were very excited that you were on and they had their questions, of course, in the chat and everything. And you're just a treasure for BookTube, and your writing is just unbelievable. I mean, I'm just so excited for us to continue this series. And
you know what's really fun is that whole resonance. Every single time that I've done a discussion with these books with somebody, on
Yeah.
YouTube, it's been a different discussion because what you bring to the table
Right.
steers it in a
Yeah.
different direction. No two of them are the same.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love how we can all bring our own, something that's filtered through life experience or like personal worldview into discussions. I feel like the community is richer for it. So it's always fun to watch other people's, and I'm just so grateful I got to do one with you. So, hopefully we'll get to do another one at some point. And I know we're all excited to jump into book 2. So yeah, thank you so much, Janny, for being
Oh, you're welcome. Nobody's more excited than me.
for sure.
This is like a dream come true, watching readers actually react to these books, because I was writing in the dark for a long, long time.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's really cool to see you enjoying it. And you're only on the ground floor. I'm gonna keep my box of duct tape handy and just watch you guys
exactly.
go through the whole thing.
And
It's a joy.
and for those of you who have tuned in this far, and if you enjoyed Curse of the Mistwraith, definitely I will be going on Amazon as well and writing a review, and make sure to do that as well, because of course it always helps. A bunch of people doing it en masse always helps the algorithm, like Janny was saying. So Janny, thank you again. Thank you all for being here. It's just so lovely that we can all chat together about this wonderful book, and looking forward to the next one and everything. And yeah, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, Janny. And thanks again. And thanks to you all. I'm Nikhil with Shelf-Esteem. Be good to yourselves. Be good to each other. And we will see you very soon. Take care, everyone.